When the Legends Die, Chapter 31. July passed and August, simmering hot. September came and Red wanted to go somewhere, do something, find a rodeo or a poker game, anything for excitement. Just a couple of shows, he urged Tom. Keep you sharp for the next spring. But Tom said no. Red became surly and then silent. He finally saddled a horse and rode away. He was gone a week, came back with a hangover, and was mean as a rabid coyote. Tom and Mayo ignored him and harvested the beans and chilies, and September passed. October came, the first frost. Tom brought in the horses and spent a week working with them in the corral. Red, Mayo said, was still mellow, meaning either sick or mean or both, but he came out to the corral and growled, "Damn shame you doing this when you could be riding for money and both of us having fun." Tom paid no attention to Red. When he felt that he was doing something wrong, he asked Mayo. Mayo said, "You work too hard. Save your arm." And when Tom asked what he meant, Mayo pointed out that he tended to power the rhythm horses. It was a shrewd observation. You powered the duckers and dodgers that kept changing rhythm, but the pattern buckers didn't need all that pressure on the rein. You rode with them, not against them. He rode the rough string until he had satisfied himself. Then, the last week in October, Red rode off again. At dusk a week later, a stranger rode down to the cabin, a little dark man on a scrawny mouse-colored horse. Tom went out to see what he wanted, but the man spoke little English. Tom called Mayo. They talked in Spanish, and Tom heard Red's name several times. Finally, Tom asked, "What's the matter with Red? Trouble?" "He is sick," this man said, Mayo told him. "Did he get shot or carved up?" Mayo shook his head. "Sick." He patted his belly. "Very sick." "Where is he?" "Aztec, in the hotel there." Tom went back to the cabin, got his hat and coat. Then, when he came out, Mayo and the stranger were at the barn, saddling a horse for him. "No, Mayo," Tom said. "I'll take the car. It's quicker." "I forgot," Mayo said. Then he said, "Wait," and hurried to the cabin. Tom started the car's motor, and Mayo came back and handed him a roll of bills. "Get the doctor," he said. It was dusk, and the road was only a trail, but Tom knew every turn, every gully. He made the 30 miles to Aztec in less than an hour, parked in front of the hotel, and went in to the desk. A little bald man was there. "Where's Red Dillon?" Tom asked. The man looked up, frowning. "You come to get him out of here?" "Where is he?" Tom demanded. The man's white eyebrows jumped. He jerked his head toward the stairway and then came around the counter. "I don't like them to die in my beds. Bad for business. You going to pay his bill?" "I'll pay what he owes." They went upstairs and along the hallway, and the man jerked a thumb toward a door. Then he turned and hurried off. The room was dark, but by the faint glow from its one window, Tom saw a bed and someone in it. He moved toward it and stumbled over a chair. "Who's there?" It was Red's voice, hoarse and rasping. "Me, Tom. Where's the lamp?" "On the dresser, over there." Tom found the lamp, lighted it, and in the glow saw the chipped iron bed, the grayish sheet, the worn brown blanket, the streaked yellow wallpaper, and Red, his face gaunt and dark with a week's stubble, his eyes deep sunken, red-rimmed, his hands lay listless. "What happened to you?" "I'm a sick man, Tom. Doc Wilson," he gasped, caught a shallow breath. "Take me home. Don't let me die in this rat hole." Tom took one of Red's hands. The fingers gripped his with a desperate strength. They felt hot. "How long you been sick?" "I lost track." Red tried to sit up, sank back on the dirty pillow. "Help me put on my pants and take me home." "Pretty soon, after I see the doctor." Red's eyes lighted in anger. He pushed Tom's hand away. "Just like the rest of them." He tried for a jeering snarl, managed only a whine. "God damn you all." Then he reached for Tom's hand again, and his fingers worked convulsively. "I didn't mean that, Tom. I didn't mean it." He pushed Tom's hands away again and growled, "Go on, get the hell out. I don't need you or anybody else." He lay wheezing for a moment, frowning in pain. Then he whispered, "But come back, Tom. Come back and take me home." Tom went downstairs. The man at the desk said Doc Wilson lived 2 blocks down in the White House. Tom found the house and went to the door marked office without knocking. A thin, dark man with a florid face sat in his shirt sleeves at a roll-top desk, littered with pill bottles, rolls of bandages, and adhesive tape, bottles of dark medicine. He was smoking a handmade cigarette, and flakes of tobacco polka-dotted his front shirt front. He looked up, scowling. "Who are you? What do you want?" His voice was a tired growl. "I'm Tom Black. I want to find out how sick Red Dillon is." The doctor took a deep puff on the cigarette, slowly let out the smoke, then dropped the butt into a cracked soup bowl already overflowing. He stamped out the coal with his thumb and wiped it on his blue serge pants. Dylan, he said, has a bad heart, and his kidneys are riddled, his liver is shot to hell, and he's got a double hernia. That answer your question? Is he going to die? Yes. How soon? The doc shrugged. I saw him 3 hours ago and figured he'd be dead by dark. He's still alive, I take it. Yes, I'm going to take him home. You'll have a corpse before you get halfway there. But Tom had turned toward the door. Wait a minute, son, the doctor said. Tom paused. Dr. Wilson got up wearily, shouldered into his coat, and put on his hat. I'll go with you to have another look. He picked up his black bag, tucked in the dangling stethoscope, and snapped it shut. They went back to the hotel, ignored the man at the desk, and went up to Red's room. Only Red's eyes moved as they came in. He watched them a moment, his eyes vague, then rasped, Where's Mio? Tell the old chili eater to make a fresh pot of coffee. Got a hell of a hangover. He lifted one hand, let it fall limply, and licked his lips. Tom glanced at the doctor, who took the stethoscope from his bag, thrust the ends into his ears, and held the diaphragm to Red's chest. Leave me alone, Red growled, gasping. He lifted a hand, tried to push the stethoscope away. The doctor stepped back, slowly shaking his head. Tom took Red's hand. It clutched desperately. Then Red's eyes seemed to clear. Take me home, Tom, he ordered. He tried to sit up. Tom put an arm around him, supporting him, and Red stared at him and whispered, Better luck next time. He swallowed hard, and his eyes closed, then opened again as with a great effort. His lips moved, whispering again, and Tom leaned close. Game's over, Red said. Then Tom couldn't catch the words until Red gasped, Dirty deal. Then the breath seemed to ease out of him. Tom led him back gently onto the pillow. He glanced at the doctor, who held the stethoscope to Red's chest a moment, waited, listened again. That's it, he said. He's gone. And he drew the sheet up over the lifeless face. They went downstairs. The man at the desk looked up, questioning. He's dead, the doctor said. God damn it, the man cried. Another bed ruined and... Shut your foul mouth, the doctor snapped. Isn't there any decency in you? Where's the room key? The man asked sullenly. In my pocket. If anybody goes in that room before the undertaker comes, you'll answer to me. He turned to the door. Come on, he said to Tom, and they went out into the street. Tom hesitated. I better go back and pay for the room. Dr. Wilson put a hand on his arm. Let the damn fool wait. I'm the coroner, and I'm running things now. Where's your horse? I drove in. Tom nodded towards his car. The doctor got in. They drove back to his house. Come on in, he ordered. They went into the doctor's office, and he got a bottle and 2 glasses from the cabinet, poured 2 drinks. He handed one to Tom and said, You can use this, then lifted his glass and said, A los muertos, as they say. He took a gulp and glanced at Tom. You're not Mexican, are you? No. Well, anyway, to the dead. Just like the rest of us, he didn't want to die, and like the rest of us, he was mortal. He sat down at the desk and deliberately rolled a cigarette, brushed the spilled tobacco from his shirt front, and struck a match. He smoked for a moment, then said, Weren't you the kid Dylan used to take the gambling crowd to a cleaning at the rodeos here a few years back? Yes. What do you do now? I'm a bronc rider. You any good? I'm a good rider. The doctor nodded, then sighed and took another gulp from his glass. At your age, we're all good, or think we are. Then life catches up with us no matter who we are. He sat silent a long moment, then said, I suppose Dylan didn't leave a dime. I guess not. And just that hideout of his, out on the river. He didn't even own that, or didn't you know? Just a squatter. He'd have any livestock out there? A few bad horses, buckers, that's all. Then Tom realized what the doctor was saying. I'll pay to bury him, he said. The doctor looked at him, surprised, but all he said was, I guess he deserves a coffin and a prayer. He was a human being, no matter what else. Want me to notify the undertaker? Yes. What are you going to do now? Go home and tell Mio. I mean, from here on, get a job as a cowhand or a wrangler. I'm going down to Odessa, the first of the year to ride. Rodeo? Tom nodded, and the doctor glanced at him and said, Time is the rider that breaks youth. He slowly shook his head. A man named George Herbert said that almost 300 years ago, and it's still true. Most of us are a long time learning it. He sat silent, considering as though wanting to say more. Then he said again, softly, Long time learning. And he sat staring at the glass in his hand. Tom set down his glass, half finished, and got to his feet. The doctor looked up, and Tom felt he was a lonely man, reluctant to see him go. But he got up, went to the porch with Tom, and out onto the porch he said, "I'll get the undertaker." Tom got in his car and started the motor. The doctor was still there on the porch, his head tilted back a little, staring up at the stars. He was still there as Tom drove away. Tom drove home, wondering whether Red would care whether he was buried in the graveyard or out on the flats or wrapped in a blanket and left in a cave somewhere in the bluffs along the river. Probably the graveyard was best, with a coffin or prayer, as the doctor said. Maybe Red would be at peace there. He went home and found the stranger, the man who had brought the message, still there, asleep in Red's bunk. He didn't rouse, but Mio did when Tom went in. Tom told Mio that Red was dead. Mio sat up and crossed himself. "So," he said. He asked no questions. He sat down on his bunk for several minutes, then lay down again, turned his face to the wall, and went back to sleep. 2 days later, they buried Red in the dusty little graveyard, just Tom and Mio and the undertaker and his helper and the preacher. The preacher, a tired little pinch-faced man in a shabby black suit, said the service by rote and read a short impersonal prayer. Mio crossed himself and muttered something in Spanish, and Tom whispered a part of an old chant in words he had almost forgotten. Then the undertaker's helper began shoveling the dirt into the grave, the clods thumping hollowly on the black coffin. Tom gave the preacher $5 and would have given him a ride back to town if he had as much as said thank you. He didn't, so Tom left him to walk or go back with the undertaker. He and Mio drove back into town, paid the doctor and the bill at the hotel. The undertaker had already been paid before the funeral, so that closed matters. They headed for home. Mio sat silent for a long time. Then he said, "It costs money to die." Tom nodded. Most of the money had come from the roll of bills Mio had given him the night they got word Red was sick. Red's own money, in a way, money that Mio had taken from Red's pockets, and he thought of Red's words, "I never could save a dime. Somebody always took it off me." Well, some of Red's money went to give him a decent burial. A little later, Mio said, "Now it is my place." "Yes," Tom said, "it is your place now, Mio." Tom gave him a quick glance, as though surprised at having no argument about it. "When my time comes," he said, "then it is your place. Don't worry about that, Mio. I won't be here long. You going away?" "I'm going to Odessa for a few more weeks." Odessa? The name seemed to mean nothing to Mio. "Odessa, Texas. That's where the big rodeos start this year." "So, you make the big rumble?" "I'm going to make the big rumble, yes. You want to come along?" Mio shook his head. "I rode my horses. I am an old man." It didn't matter to Tom whether Mio went along or not. Nobody else can live your life for you. You have to ride your own furies. He said more to himself than to Mio. "I got a lot of riding to do." "What?" Mio asked. "I got a lot of horses to ride," Tom said.